Hi guys, so this is just a really quick tutorial talking about walking seams, why it's important, why you should know about it, why I wish I had known about it, and kind of just some best practices. I will preface this whole thing, this is how I learned it, so obviously, you know, if you've been sewing for a while, you might do it differently, or you might not do it at all and not realize why it's important. So with that said, walking a seam, why is it important? Because when you're doing editing on your, you know, different pattern pieces, let's say you have to do a full bust adjustment or you fix a seam here or whatever, you're ultimately having to have both pieces, you need to have it match the pieces around it, right? So if, for example, you fix the shoulder and you only fix the front, that front shoulder piece needs to match the back shoulder piece. Same thing, you know, if you do a full bust adjustment, the front piece needs to still fit the back piece. Now, story time on this, just really quick, is that I didn't know how to do this for half the time that I've been sewing. Like, I didn't even think about it. I didn't even know why my pattern pieces didn't keep fitting, and I would measure them and kind of be like, it's kind of close, I don't know why not, whatever, and I just keep going and keep having problems. You know, sometimes like the front would be really big and the back would be really short, like it was awful. So anyway, so I'm just going to explain the concept of it really fast. So let's say this is my sample pattern pieces, right? So I'm just doing them right now for this sample straight so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. Now, if these are two pattern pieces, the area here at the top and like on the side and the bottom, these are the seam allowances. So what I did was I drew in a seam allowance. In this case, it's 5/8. It could be whatever, ½ inch, an inch, whatever, right? So this is the piece that it needs to match, right? So if I were to overlap them, overlapping seam allowances, that seam line, this line here, should match up with this. Now the concept is simple, right? Notches would match, all that sort of thing. The concept makes sense, yes, but if you're working on a piece like a full bust adjusted princess seam, or like a crazily adjusted top to a skirt, you might not realize that you do still need to double check that those two lines here match up together. So this is it on a straight line. I'm going to show you guys kind of on a curved line and how to match up those pattern pieces on a curved line, especially after you've done adjustments. Okay, so to walk a seam, the concept is pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and do it with these straight pieces first so you can kind of see what's up. Now, what you're going to do is you're essentially going to match up these two pattern pieces at the corners where the seam allowances meet, and then follow the line and make sure that it meets again at the other side. So you know, especially as it gets a little bit more complicated and you have curvy seams and curvy lines and stuff, I usually take a pencil or some sort of pen or something. So what I'll do is I'll kind of make sure that these match up, right? And then I will put my pencil right on the corner of where that seam matches up. And so you're going to want to do this with everything. So just, you know, just so you know, you kind of want to be able to hinge it, right? So at that point, I kind of just follow this down. And, you know, if you're curving, you're going to have to turn this. But you would keep moving it down, 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 and match it up at places like, for example, this notch, and just at that point you can move this pattern piece out of the way and kind of see, it's like, okay, cool, yeah, it matches up at the notch. And then you would do this all the way down until you get to the end to make sure that that corner, well, at this point I kind of wiggled it a little bit, but to make sure that that corner matches with that corner, right? So that's the concept of walking a line. Now, once you start working with other pieces that you've adjusted and curved seams and things like that, that's where it starts getting complicated. Now, you want to go ahead and have some sort of ruler, or if you have a measuring tape, that'll work as well. So the first thing that I do, so here you can kind of see I have my edited piece and then like my original piece, right? And let's say these were seams that needed to be sewn together. So I can see right off the bat that they're not going to fit, right? This edited piece is already too big. This one is too small, and it's just not going to work. So, you know, in this example, it's obvious, but it's not always going to be this obvious, right? So the first thing that I always do is just make sure to measure that seam. Now, remember, the seam is going to be from the seam allowances here, right? So this circle here and this circle here. So I would go ahead and just measure it, right? Now you might not always need this measurement, but it's just a good one to know. And so it's almost like, you know, it's not mandatory, but I highly recommend just taking it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and measure that. And in this instance is 10 1/4 And I always just make that note on my pattern piece just in case. On this side, I'm gonna go ahead and measure that as well. Right, so now in this, like here, you can kind of see that it's gonna be a little bit more complicated to measure, right? So that's where the curved, like flexible ruler comes in handy, so that you can kind of measure up until it's hard to hold, right? And you can let that go and then keep measuring all the way down and curve that ruler so it fits, right? So in this instance, it's about 9 1/4. We'll just call it that for this example's sake. All right, so I went ahead and I made my notes, and I can already see it's about 1 inch off, right? So, I mean, I already knew that because if I measure that opening, it's 1 inch, so it makes sense. But so from here, you would just kind of want to start to, again, like you did on the straight lines, is kind of match up that seam there, and then you would walk it all the way around, right? So take my pencil, kind of add it there, and start doing that. Now this is specifically really helpful if the seams are facing opposite directions, just because you're not going to be able to conceptualize it as well until you get to here, right? So this basically confirms as I go down and I rotate it and I match it up. This confirms if I'm here. So the distance between here is 1 inch, which is that opening, right? So this is where it gets tricky, and you really have to know where the seams are and kind of like the side lines. In this case, I know that the opening is going to be here, so I could go ahead and slash and spread that open, but it's not going to be obvious when you're like here, you know, when it doesn't match at the bottom, or if it doesn't match at the top. At that point, you would kind of have to add on pieces to this to make it work. But anyway, so the whole concept of the walking the seam is just making sure that this lines up and how much that distance is, how much you need to adjust the original piece in order to match the piece that is off. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. You know, as I said, everybody does it a little bit differently. This is just how I do it. So if you have another way that you like to do it, please go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. I would love to learn different ways of doing what I do. So anyway, I hope you guys, as I said, like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, all the good stuff, all the places, and I'll see you guys next one. Bye.